Hello, everyone. What's going on? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. It is the 20th of December, 2022, and on today's episode, we are going to be going over the Eagles and Bears game from Week 15 and all the ramifications from that game, as well as look ahead to the big Christmas Eve matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Before we get into the show, however, please hit that subscribe button. If you're joining us on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give the show a follow, a review. Also, if you follow us on Twitter, you can find all the handles to our accounts in the description below. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. All right, starting off our show today, we are going to be discussing the Eagles and Bears game from Week 15 on Sunday. Eagles ended up getting a victory 25-20 in a very frigid game against the Bears. In a game the Eagles stood out in the passing game, which led them to the victory, moving their record to 13-1, tying a franchise record for wins in a season. Just been a magical ride so far for the Birds. Jalen Hurts threw for 315 yards, also threw 2 interceptions as well. He also added 61 yards on the ground and 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 QB sneaks, and a 22-yard scamper from outside the red zone. Speaking of Jalen Hurts, 315 yards through the air. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both went well over 100 yards receiving each in this game. Brown set a career high in receiving yards for the third time this year with 181 yards on 9 catches. Devontae Smith has just quietly been one of the best number 2 receivers in the league, been one of the best sidekicks to A.J. Brown's lead role, if you will, but that is kind of underselling the value that Devontae Smith has provided to the Eagles this year. He has been an absolute beast. He has been a true number 1 receiver. He's just opposite another true number 1 receiver. So both of them have been phenomenal. Smith tallied 126 yards on 5 receptions, like I mentioned, and just absolutely dominated. Had a number of big catches in the game, a number of long catches as well. So when he's able to get in the open field and show those wheels off, it's absolutely a sight to behold. The running game actually was not as utilized as was expected after Miles Sanders set a career high in rushing attempts and rushing yards last week against the Giants. It was a little interesting to see that they kind of went off that script a little bit. Sanders only ran 11 times for 42 yards. He also lost a fumble. And Hurts himself actually ran the ball 17 times. So really was leaning on Jalen Hurts in the running game. Many of those plays, though, were option plays, a little RPO action where Hurts, had the ball, and obviously, the defense kind of dictated that the quarterback should keep the ball, and, Hurts making the right reads was able to hold on to the ball more than hand it to Miles. So that is something that Nick Sirianni addressed after the game. He mentioned that he needs to do a better job of dialing up designed runs for Sanders and not let the defense kind of dictate as much for the Eagles offense. So, it was really, really good to see that Sirianni came out after the game and mentioned that, he said, that's on me, that's my mistake. I'm going to go back and make sure that him and Shane Steichen go back and make sure they really look at the running game and dial it up, because especially with what happened in this game, we'll get to that in a little bit, you do really need to lean on the running game, especially as the weather gets colder, especially as you start to go up against better teams, especially as you go up against more explosive offenses. You need to be able to hang on to the ball. And while Jalen Hurts is having a phenomenal year, an MVP type season, as well as having A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside, you need to be able to run the ball. And there's nothing that offensive line likes to do more than run block, go out and hit some people. And Miles Sanders is having a phenomenal year. He's gone over 1,000 yards this season. He's the first Eagles running back since 2014 in LaShawn McCoy to go over that number. And he's just been running the ball with force all year. So I do think you need to reward Miles a little bit. He needs to be getting at least 15 carries a game. And when he's really cooking, he should really be approaching 20. He had 26 carries, I believe, against the Giants last week, over 120, 130 yards. I forget what the final number. It might have been 140, honestly. I forget what the final number was, but you really do need to utilize that, especially as you get later in the season, especially as we get ready for the playoffs and all that kind of goes with that. So it was good to hear Sirianni mention that after the game, like I said. And in this game, they're going up against the Chicago Bears, a team that's 3-10 coming in, 3-11 going out. Obviously, not a lot of weapons on the outside on their team. However, a great running team. You're not quite as worried about them putting up a lot of points and holding on to the ball like Washington did against the Philadelphia Eagles earlier this season. So you do need to establish the run. And I hate to be one of those guys that's like run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball when you do have the elite weapons and elite quarterback. But we've seen the formula work time and time again in the NFL. As you get later in the season, the running game does need to be crucially involved, and it will be. Under Nick Sirianni, that's been one of the big things. And obviously Jeff Stoutland, the run game coordinator and offensive line coach, it's been one of the main focuses of the Eagles the last 2 years. So I expect them to get that righted as we kind of move into next week. The defense in this game was also on another level. The defensive line had a great game, which has been the case all season, but was especially potent against a team that has an offensive line that has been struggling mightily all season. Javon Hargrave, Josh Sweat, and Hassan Reddick each tallied 2 sacks each in this one. Javon Hargrave has just been an absolute stud. He's probably going to be a Pro Bowler this year. He's been one of the leading vote getters at the defensive tackle position in the NFC. Josh Sweat is looking like that contract extension the Eagles signed him to, I believe it was before last season, is just an absolute steal. So he is absolutely blossoming into what the Eagles thought they could get when they drafted him. And then Hassan Reddick. Reddick was everywhere on Sunday. He had one of his best games this season in an Eagles uniform. He also forced a fumble and recovered it as well on a jet sweep to the sideline. And his signing this offseason, I don't think it really has been getting enough publicity, but it's proving to be one of the best free agent signings made by any team from last offseason. He's the only defensive end to have 10 sacks in the last 3 seasons. Meanwhile, he's done that on 3 different teams. He was on the Cardinals 2 years ago, the Panthers last year, and obviously now on the Eagles, has just been absolutely dominating. His name needs to be mentioned among the elite pass rushers in the league. And for a team in the Eagles that was bottom 3 in sacks last year, they addressed that hole with Hassan Reddick, and he has been a freight train on the edge. He's been attracting attention, which has really opened up Javon Hargrave in the middle, which has really opened up Fletcher Cox again, Milton Williams, just those defensive tackles on the inside. And it's also taken some attention away from Josh Sweat on the other end. So just an A-plus signing for the Eagles in Hassan Reddick, and just an elite player in his own right in Reddick. So as we kind of wrap up the thoughts from this game specifically on the field, it was a good game as well. They had to have another drive late in the fourth quarter after they gave up a score to let them back within 1 possession. They had another drive where they had to ice the game. It was good to see them kind of be able to drive down. Crucial 3rd down, throw a slant to A.J. Brown, get a 1st down, milk the clock. The Bears were out of timeout. So it was good that in a game that they were controlling for the most part in the first quarter, it was pretty much back and forth, obviously, with the 2 interceptions from Hurts. The fact that it was 0-0, I think the Eagles would have been okay with that. But they were pretty much dominating from that point on. It was good to see them kind of have to put a drive together in the fourth quarter to ice the clock and get the clock out. So I thought that was a good positive to take away from this game. However, a negative coming out of this game was Jalen Hurts suffering a sprained shoulder. It is believed to be his throwing shoulder after getting landed on by one of the big defensive linemen for the Bears. So it's been an issue, or it's been a fear of many Eagles fans this season. Jalen Hurts obviously being able to run. He's been taking a number of hits this year, but this one, I guess, had a little bit more oomph on it. So this one definitely hurt a little bit more. He has avoided major injury, it seems. However, it still appears as if the injury may cost him a game or two. Hurts actually spoke to the media today. He had a press conference today, and he said he planned on throwing today this week, normal and everything. And he didn't really seem worried about missing this game. He talked about his shoulder a little bit, and then immediately kind of shifted the focus right to the Dallas defense and started really kind of dissecting that in his press conference and wanted questions about that. So, he's a really, really tough player, really strong player. So, I could see him really, really pushing to get in this game, but I do think the Eagles need to understand the bigger picture here, and I think they do. I think the Eagles are very aware of what's to play for the rest of the season. The Eagles only need one more win in the last 3 games to clinch the number 1 seed in the NFC. So with games up against New Orleans at home and then the New York Giants at home, you do have 2 games which you should be favored heavily in. So we do need to understand here that we shouldn't rush Jalen Hurts back into this game if there's fears of A, a re-injury, B, a worsening of the same injury, any of the likes. So I think that they do need to be careful, and they will be. I think they're very good with their kind of injury diagnosis, especially with the last couple of years. So I know Hurts is going to clamor to play. I would love to see him out there. He's a quarterback on a fantasy team I have in the fantasy semifinals, so I would absolutely love for him to be out there. But if he's not ready to go this weekend, it appears as if Gardner Minshew will be under center against the Cowboys. Minshew's more than capable. He had to step in last year when Jalen Hurts hurt his ankle. Granted, it was against the Jets, but he went out there and threw 3 touchdown passes. The Eagles scored on their first 7 drives. And they have a lot of confidence in him that he can step in and win games in any event. So even Dallas Goedert, news came down today that Dallas Goedert was activated off the IR, so he should be healthy going into this game against the Cowboys. He was even mentioning how he kind of expects Gardner Minshew to be under center. So I think that the Eagles, they dodged a bullet a little bit. There was rumors of a collarbone issue. There was some tweets that came out. Granted, they could have just been random things, but you never like to see things like that. The mechanism of injury did kind of look like one where he may have hurt a collarbone, where he kind of gets crunched on the ground and someone just lands right on his shoulder. It was scary because he stayed down for a little bit, and it was one of those hits that kind of take your breath away for a few seconds. But he's a tough guy. I think he wants to get out there, and if he can, he will. And I think that's an important thing. The Cowboys, as we kind of shift to a preview of the Cowboys Eagles game, the Cowboys actually lost last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars in overtime. It was an absolutely crazy game. They were controlling it and dominating it, and then Trevor Lawrence led the charge back into it. Jacksonville ended up hitting a field goal at the end of regulation and then ended up winning the toss in overtime, but stalling and kicking the ball back to Dallas. Dallas ended up throwing an interception, Dak Prescott ended up throwing an interception, which got returned for a touchdown. Game over. Jacksonville wins. So with that loss by the Cowboys, it's moved the Eagles' magic number for the division to 1, and also moved their magic number in the race for the number 1 seed to 1. So a really consequential loss for the Cowboys in that one, and it was big time that the Eagles ended up handling their game against the Bears. So it's going to be really, really interesting. The last time the Eagles and the Cowboys met was week 6, all the way back in Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football. That game, if you will remember, was quarterbacked by Cooper Rush for the Dallas Cowboys. At that point in time was playing very, very well, but in this game against the Eagles, he kind of fell apart a little bit. He had 3 interceptions. He was sacked 4 times, which was really the difference in the game, because when you look at the stats outside of time of possession, total yards, a lot of the things were very similar. Obviously, the Cowboys outgained us yardage-wise. They had a better yards per play. They had about the same number of first downs, a similar efficiency on third down. But the thing was, they had much more penalties. They had 10 penalties compared to the Eagles' 2. They allowed 4 sacks. The Eagles allowed none. And they turned the ball over 3 times, and the Eagles did not turn the ball over once. And I think that kind of dictated that game, especially, as they got into the second half when the Cowboys started gaining some momentum. The penalties and turnovers really ended up hurting them as the game kind of came into the fourth quarter, and then the Eagles put together a fourth quarter drive where they scored a touchdown and really much put the game away. So as we kind of get into this Christmas Eve matchup, the Cowboys obviously have Dak Prescott back under center. They've recently went out and acquired wide receiver T.Y. Hilton to add to their wide receiving core. CeeDee Lamb has been phenomenal. Tony Pollard has really flourished at the running back position for Dallas, giving them a ridiculous combination of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, a little 1-2 punch, thunder and lightning behind their offensive line. Tyron Smith, their offensive tackle, is, I believe, scheduled to play in this one. We'll have to keep an eye on the injury report for that one. But he's a monster piece for their offensive line. And it's going to be really interesting. I've never been the biggest Dak Prescott guy. Anyone that's listened to this podcast knows that. But I do think he's a very capable, more than capable quarterback that can get the job done. And especially with them being home, it's going to be a playoff type atmosphere there. I could definitely see the Cowboys winning this game. They opened up as a 1-point favorite, which I thought was a little bit disrespectful. And then with the news that Jalen Hurts' shoulder injury, the line flew even more in that direction. I believe the last time I checked, the Cowboys were minus 5-point favorites, so projected to win by 5 points. Even if that's the case, I'll still take the Eagles on the spread. I think the roster is just better. I think Minshew can get the job done. But it is in Dallas, so you kind of get that 3-point bump. So we'll see kind of what happens there. The Eagles defense has been playing phenomenally. The Eagles have been healthy, knock on wood. They're still awaiting the return of C.J. Gardner-Johnson at the safety position. But other than that, they get Dallas Goedert back this week. They got Avonte Maddox back a couple weeks ago. They're starting to get healthy. They're playing pretty well at the right time. And it's going to be a very, very interesting matchup. I absolutely can't wait to see it. It's going to be pretty much a game of the week, 4:25 game on Fox. And it's going to be really interesting to see. We're definitely going to keep an eye on the injury report as we move throughout the week. And that's going to be crucial. If Hurts does end up playing, he's one tough SOB, so I could definitely see him playing. And if he does, I do think the Eagles should be favored in this game. The Cowboys almost lost to the Houston Texans at home, who are 1-12-1, and then they lose to Jacksonville in Jacksonville. So their form is not good coming into this game. The Eagles obviously have won a number in a row, so I do think that if Hurts does play, Eagles should be favored. If they don't, Cowboys should definitely be favored, but I do think Minshew has a chance to get the win. Obviously, like I said, we'll keep an eye on the injury report as we move through the week, but we'll see what happens, and we will definitely be ready to go on Saturday. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for the show today. Once again, please check the description below for all of our social media handles. Again, feel free to shoot us any questions on Instagram through text or on the comments of our YouTube channel, and we'll answer them on the show. Thank you guys once again for tuning in, and we will see you again next time.